Most leaders think that they have a people problem, when in fact, that's not the entire story. They actually have what we call a mirror problem. And today, in this episode, we're actually going to talk about what happens when you're finally willing to look at that. So, again, I'm TJ Fabis, Be the Bean. I have Shari Courtney here with me on the other side of the screen. And Shari, why don't you dive in and give us a quick overview of what is Be the Bean at work, and like does this episode matter today?
Yeah. Thank you, TJ. I appreciate that. So Be the Bean at Work is about helping people remember that who they are matters. That's truly the crux of it. Who they are matters. And then the way that they show up can change the atmosphere of an entire room. So when you multiply that across a team, you begin to shape a culture, and that's what we want to do. We want to shape a culture because culture isn't really about policies or being built by policies. It's really built by people. And I think that, we've kind of gone from Be the Bean in the networking realm over to this, but I think that they really mirror each other in the sense that we really are talking about shaping culture and, just remembering who you are and the presence that you bring whenever you walk into a room.
Yeah, that's so good because it's really interesting how we got here. And Be the Bean itself, like the networking component, started out not really focused on like the workplace itself, but bringing people together. And we realized, and I think you realized and brought it to my attention, how much that really matters inside of the organization as well. And I've seen
100%.
that experience. I know you've had that experience in your career as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I just think that it's fundamental. I think that maybe we've moved away from some of the basics, and maybe just coming back to that is really such an easy place to land, an easy thing to talk about. Just coming back to the basics.
Right. And the analogy to me is so powerful. And I didn't realize it was powerful until I've shared it with other people. Like, sometimes we think, is it silly? Is it too simple? But sometimes it's the simple things that really stick. And I've talked to school teachers, I've talked to business owners, I've talked to faith leaders, and when they hear the analogy of the bean, they're like, oh, yeah, that
Yeah,
makes so much sense. And so
yeah.
I think it's a good place to start, which is what is the Be the Bean analogy, so we can set the foundation for how this is all set up.
Yeah, the Be the Bean analogy is basically the atmosphere in which people change who they are. So, some people get hard, and that would be equated to, if you put an egg into boiling water, they get hard in different situations. Or the carrot, where you put that into boiling water and it gets soft. Some people just get soft; they fall apart. And some people walk into a room and they change the atmosphere around them by what they bring into that space. And so that's why we call it the bean. Be the bean, be that change, be that atmosphere shifter, if you will. So those are the analogies, the hard, the soft, or the change.
Right. And it's based on the book by John Gordon, if I'm correct, right? And
Yep.
so
It's,
yeah, yeah, that coffee bean principle. And it's so interesting,
yeah.
right? That you think of a hard-boiled egg, right? It got changed by the environment. The carrot also got changed by the environment, but just in a different way, right? Where it became
Right.
soft, it kind of crumbled under pressure. Whereas the coffee bean itself, well, what happens? Well, you put a coffee bean into water and you get coffee, which is great. It
Yep.
changes the environment instead of being changed by the environment. Now you think about anyone who's trying to show up as a leader in their life, even if it's just for themselves or for their family or for the small team that they manage, or maybe they don't manage a team, but they're trying to improve their influence on something that's going on inside their organization or inside their family. Like, it's a really powerful analogy
It's
because
so
there's so much
powerful.
pressure, right? All the pressure and all these things which we're going to dive into today, which I'm really excited to talk about.
Yeah.
But I do want to set
Yeah.
the foundation there.
Yeah. I think that's good. That's a good foundation. And again, just to come back to that simple point, the coffee bean book. Um, I think it's almost written at a kid's level. It does have a lot of pictures in it, but just extraction from that simple book really has kind of brought us to where we are, TJ, in Be the Bean networking, Be the Bean at work. It really does lay the foundation for everything that we want to talk about.
What are you hoping? What change are you hoping to create or bring about with Be the Bean at work?
Yeah, the change that I'm really hoping to bring about is helping people to realize, who they are and, the presence that they bring can really change the atmosphere, right? So I think that we could speak to a couple of different things. This could actually be related to an employer who has, feeling seemingly what they think is a culture problem, and really talking about the leadership piece of that. Or we could talk to the employee who, perhaps in the beginning were so incredibly excited about the opportunity, the job that they were able to get, and walking in the door, and then feeling like maybe they're not heard or they don't love where they're working anymore. And how do you transform that? How do you change that in that minds of each one of these individuals?
I want to talk to you about and just get your perspective because you've had a number of leadership positions, you've shaped a number of organizations. And so things like leadership, retention, culture issues, the environment. But before I do, if someone is tuning in for the first time, they've never listened to an episode of ours, like give me the 30-second skinny on your background. That sounds so weird. On your background and what perspective you're and experience you bring to the table. Because I think that's really important.
Yeah, well, I started my background many, many, many years ago, but I actually started in the dental industry, and learned that I really love people just from that. I mean, I was working in that industry, learned that I was really good at going out and talking to people. And then from there, kind of moved into the medical realm, and I've been in that piece for 25 years. But you know, I was boots on the ground. I was, out there just performing just like anybody else. It's a 9 to 5 job, and you're doing what you're supposed to do. And I enjoyed it. I was good at it. But then from there, I moved into some leadership roles. I began to do some managing, and in that, I always wanted to help people be more than maybe they saw themselves as. So I began to, I did some of the coaching things through John Maxwell and through John Gordon, and I thought that I would use that in a different way. But what I did is I used that to grow the teams that I had. I used that to help them to dial into who they were and the voices that they had. And I helped people believe that they truly can do what they put their mind to. And I just had this opportunity to pour into people. And I think that that's what I want to do now is change kind of the way that maybe people are leading at this very moment, and help them to see that um how you pour into people. I used to always say, I love on my people really, really hard, but because I do that, I can also speak truth into them. And sometimes truth is hard to hear.
Hmm.
But that's what I would do. I would just speak truth into them. If I felt like they were not, stepping into exactly, and performing the way that they really probably could, I would speak to that. And I think that because I had loved people so well, even as a leader, people respond well to that. And I always tried to help people think that they were a part of something bigger than them, right? That they had this opportunity to not just be status quo, but to be more than that, to bring more to the table. And I do believe that when you believe in people, that helps them believe in themselves. And that does change everything.
In terms of the results, in terms of the things that I've seen, this is my reflection and synthesis, I suppose, over the past 10 years that we've known each other. I see you as one of those influential leaders, someone who has had that positive and significant impact on my life and many others as well. Now, you're the type of person who, like, any organization would want, because if they're coming in at like a leadership level, is I've seen you go from, say, one like job, for example, or one company to another, and have the ability to bring 5, 10, 15, 20 A players, like the best of the best with you. And that is very rare. And so I wanted to point that out, because if we're going to be talking about advice, because essentially that's what we're doing, we're talking heads here, sitting and
Yeah,
giving advice to companies, to leaders within organizations on how they might
right,
want to look at this, shift their perspective.
right.
I think understanding some of the things that you've been able to do and the words that you say carry weight to them. And that's my perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. And if I could speak to that, I would just say that the things that I think that would make me different and unique than some, for whatever reason that, people follow me, is simply because I believe in them. I believe in them. I think that they are, God gives us all specific gifts and talents. And I'm very, the people that I bring on my team, I believe in them. I believe that they can, learn and grow. And I think that not all leaders believe in their teams. And I, I've always tried to give them a voice.
Mm.
And more than that, help them, validate them, pour into them, show them how to do what they need to do, not just say it, but do it alongside of them. Um, and I think that that's kind of what has, and fight for them. I'm a fighter. Like I in the most loving way. I, want them to be able to, feel empowered and know that somebody's always got their back, that they're never going to be out there alone and not get an answer or not have somebody, be by their side. That is probably part of creating a great culture.
Mm. Yeah, you say it, you mean it, it's true. There are people that say that but don't really mean it, and it's not really true for them.
Yeah.
But I want to talk about, I don't want to say that the job market, but really the overall landscape of things, because one of the hot button issues I know that so many companies are facing is retention. It's like, okay, one, can we attract good employees? But really the bigger issue is, how do we retain the people that are going to be difference makers within the organization? So if, say, an organization leader comes up to you and they're saying, I have retention problems, I can't find good people, like these sort of things, like, what do they actually, what do they mean by that? What are they telling you? And maybe what are some of their blind spots?
Yeah, I think that retention again is very, very much about having people feel like they're a part of something bigger than themselves, feel like they have a say in what happens in the workplace. I think that retention is, it's not really a talent problem. It's really more of a trust problem. Um, and I think that sometimes people feel like maybe, things are broken wherever they are. And that's why maybe they're leaving positions, when people stop speaking up, when they, meetings become quiet, they're, just using their voice is they're not doing that anymore. I think the best people will quietly leave, right? So we hear about people quietly quitting. Um, so I just think that retention is about giving people a voice, hearing them, listening to them, and um, walking hand in hand with them to figure out what's the solution.
Are there any specific instances that you'd be comfortable talking about or willing to talk about, where either as an outsider or an insider, you saw this taking place?
Yeah, I've seen it take place a lot. And I think that, there's a couple of different levels of management. And I think that when you get pretty high in management, you're looking for all the things that matter, right? You're looking for the numbers, you're looking for um, you know, productivity. And I think that sometimes there's a disconnect. A lot of times there's a disconnect, and I think that that's where it gets broken. And I think that voices aren't heard anymore, and that's where people begin to just change their viewpoint about where they are, where they're working, what they want to do. They don't feel valued anymore. They don't feel seen anymore. They don't feel heard. And yeah, I don't think that people leave just because things get hard. They leave because they stop feeling valued. Um, but I've seen this happen a lot. And I think that that is why I've had great success, is because I really want to lean in and hear what people are saying, and have a solution, come up with the solution, be able to fix that. So that people don't leave, so that they do reengage, so that they do produce, and and they love what they're doing. So being producing is amazing, right? So they're amazing because they're bringing in the numbers, but it feels good to them because it's so genuine. They're out there doing what they love. And so I love to have people love their jobs. So that's probably the middle ground, and trying to help people from the higher level to boots on the ground. There's that middle level there. And that, to me, that just means helping them to really dig into where they are, and love what they're doing, and feel like it's maybe they're a part of something bigger than them.
Do you think, is it possible to get people, the majority of people in the organization, to love their job?
I do. I really do. Because, TJ, people didn't, just walk into that opportunity or that job just haphazardly, typically, right? They prayed for that job. They wanted that job. They were, you know, longed for that job. And normally what you'll see is people come into a position, and they go full force, and they love it. And then something begins to happen, right? And they're not heard anymore. They're not loving it. But I do think we could come back to a place where people absolutely are rooted and grounded and love, their fellow employees. Um, you get to create this climate where people feel like they're a part of it. So yeah, I think that there's a huge opportunity to come back to bringing that back to a place where people love to work.
You said something before, well, it was word. The word was trust. And as I was reflecting on this, taking in everything that you were saying here, I think sometimes we undervalue that, or maybe miss the mark on that one thing. And because
Mhm.
trust is built in those micro moments, it's not like, okay, we come in and there's this agreement. You're starting with a new organization. We trust that they're going to pay us on time, right? We trust that if we show up and do the
Right.
work, they're going to pay us. They trust us to do the work. And it's a little bit transactional, but also if you're following a
Mhm.
leader, somebody that you already know, there's like, I came to positions because of you. Like, even if the company didn't even exist yet, or it was just starting, yeah, I trusted you enough where I believed it was going to work out. But the thing that I think about is, you're absolutely right. People tend to start in a position and they're very excited about it. Things might be going, maybe they're going well in their lives. But if you're working for a company with people for long enough, there's going to be these ebbs and flows of the natural, of just their life. They're going to have some really negative events that happen. They're going to have some hard
Right.
times, family, relationships, financial, all kinds of different things. And to just assume that this person is going to be a machine and show up and continue to produce day in and day out without being impacted by what's going on in their daily life, is
Yeah.
is silly. It's just silly. And yes, we all have to be professional, but we have to show up. But my point here is on the piece of trust, right? When say we're in a leadership position, when somebody that's working with us, we have to have that level of trust and understanding where we can ask those questions, right? We can dive in and really understand what is going on in their lives, what changed, especially if maybe they're in a sales role or producing role and we see things start to dip off. Not just assume that, oh, they're checked out, like they don't want to do this anymore, they don't love their job. Maybe something is going on that we don't understand. And to be able to
Right.
have those conversations again is built on that layer of trust. And again, it's built over time through micro
Right.
moments, and it can be broken like this.
Yeah.
So I think
Yeah.
that is just a piece that really resonates for me. And I'm thinking like my daily actions, am I building trust or am I taking away trust? Like, how do you do that? And so from your
Yeah.
perspective, how have you built such high levels of trust with the people that have reported to you, with people above you, below you, all of that?
Yeah. I think that I've built trust just by being committed to the person, and sometimes that was a little bit difficult because there were a lot of persons, there were a lot of people, but I always made it a point to try to know about them, about their lives, they have kids, they're married, how many commitments they have. I mean, and I understand that that's not always possible, but that's what I always tried to do was know the person and know what their life was like. So that way I could really speak into their life at work as well. And really try to, to be a part of their life. And I have to admit that there were times that I was a pretty hard leader. And had a really and I don't think that that's a bad thing either. I mean, I do think that, the high level of, um just what you think that people can produce. I push people hard, and I don't know that that's a bad thing, but I think that I was able to push people hard because I knew them. I knew what their life was. I could come along beside them. I was never afraid to go into the field with them, be a part of whatever they had going on. Um, but I honestly get both sides because I have been at a place where I was so busy that I had to, I would just, I didn't have time for some of that, but I know that that knowing people well and walking alongside of them is what does create the trust.
Yeah, you hit on something really important. And like, having that relationship where you can understand what's going on in their lives does not mean that you're going soft, like the
Nope.
carrot, right? In
Yeah.
fact, it allows you to be more firm, to be harder on them without them feeling personally attacked. Because at the end of the day, like they know you're invested in them as a human
Yeah.
being, right? And
Yeah.
you want the best for
Yep.
them. I think, I don't know if it's still there, but I read that somewhere that the inside the Pittsburgh Steelers locker room, there's a saying that says the standard is the standard, right? And so you can set standards within your organization, and you're helping hold those people to that standard by pulling them, pushing them. But again, having that level of trust built up over time where they know it's not just you sitting like pointing the finger, oh, you were off by your numbers by one, fix it or you're gone. Like that's not at all what's happening, because nobody who responds. I mean, I guess some people may respond to that, they really need
Yeah.
a job, but not in the long term, right? Not in
Yeah.
the long term.
Yeah. And that's the absolute truth. I mean, I would always tell my teams that I can be hard on you, or I knew that I could be hard on them because I knew them well and I loved them well. I think that you have to have that balance. You have to have that balance. You cannot just bark orders from behind your desk and say, get out there and bring in, the numbers and be super high, be a high producer without being engaged and without believing in the person. So I think that that's a huge part of it.
We hear so many people talking about culture, culture. And I mean, the statistics around this like what that actually means in terms of the bottom line of a company are staggering when we looked it up. But what is your definition of culture? What does that actually mean?
Yeah. So I actually do have a definition, and this definition says that culture is what people feel when a leader walks into the room,
Hmm. The feeling.
right? What are you creating? Because
Hmm.
you are creating a culture as a leader. You're creating that. But I'd love to go beyond that and say that, it even as an employee, you're going to work, it's your 9 to 5 job, you get an opportunity to create a culture as well, right? Because every single day, every one of us have influence, and we're influencing the places that we walk into, whether it's our home, whether it's work, wherever you go, you are influencing something. And so I used to have one person that would walk into work, and this person was either extremely high, like, oh, everything's great, or just like, woe is me. And one time I just said to this person, could you just be maybe right here? You don't have to be this or that, but you have an opportunity to create the culture and people are looking at you, right? And I think that when people understand that they do bring a presence into the room, they do have an opportunity to shift culture by who they are, then people begin to show up in a different way.
Yeah, I love that definition and the expansion upon that. And you're right. Like, okay,
Mhm.
you walk into a room, like everyone has a different energy about them. I think this takes some level of self-awareness too, right? And to say, well, maybe I need to ask myself the hard question, like what feeling am I giving other people? And not to, I mean, you're not
So
always in
good.
the state of like wondering what everyone else thinks, but especially when you're in that, when you have a leadership role or title, whatever it is, being mindful of how you're showing up, of how your energy is, because it literally impacts everything else. It's so funny, you know, the place that you can see this on such a great scale is professional sports. So
Hmm.
I have a really good example of this. I mean, I'm a big soccer fan. My kids play, I played soccer my whole life. My kids play soccer. And one of the teams that I watched growing up was Manchester United, a team in the English Football League. And in like 90s, 2000s, like they were the best team, probably the highest paid and most well-known soccer team in the world, most brand deals, all of that. And then over the past, I don't know, 6, 7 years, 8 years, they've had like a lull, like just not the Manchester United team that like anybody really knew. Not great seasons, kind of middle of the road, which is very unusual for them because their expectation, their standard was up here. And so last year they hired this coach from Portugal, who had a very successful run of seasons there, won titles in Portugal. This guy came over, and they're like, okay, Ruben Amorim, he's going to be the guy that like brings Manchester United back to where they need to be. But it didn't work. It was
Mm.
super interesting. Like the entire season, so losing a bunch of games, so on and so forth. Fast forward to today, and maybe say month and a half ago, they got rid of him mid-season, which is very unusual. Like
Oh,
teams
wow.
just generally don't do that. But they got rid of him and brought in this coach that was on one in Manchester United's like younger teams. One it was like their U19 or something. They brought him up as like an interim coach. And by making that change, they've won. I don't think they've lost a game in like the past 10 weeks or something like that. They
Wow.
they've
Wow.
won like 8 of 10, tied two, and now they're in like the top 4 or 5 of the league. And like, how do you do that? It's literally the
Yeah.
same team, same players, but
Yeah.
different coach,
See,
right? And so
love
you see
that.
this and you're like,
Yeah.
okay, what is going on? How can one person that's not even playing the game make that much of a difference? And so this is
Yeah.
hammers on the point, like how much of a difference like good leadership can make.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. No, I think that you're right, I think that sometimes the influence that you have over people is, it becomes sacred when you when you have some humility, you, you know, you, I don't know. I don't know what made the difference in that team with that culture, with those people. But you know, you have to perhaps even have some type of humility, right? There's no shame. You just have awareness. Um, and maybe that's part of what he had when leading these guys.
That's so funny that you mentioned humility, because I get two different feelings and see two different entire things. So the guy that got fired, very high energy, like angry kind of coach, and like you can see the body language. The new guy that came in, like, even though he's not old, but steady sea captain in a storm. Like very calm,
Yep.
very humble, very much like, we're gonna be fine. And sure enough, like, whatever that difference was, and I do see like a humility there where maybe there
Yeah.
wasn't on the other side.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think
Super
that what
interesting.
happens sometimes when you're just pushing and you're driving, you sometimes you miss signs from people, and this is sometimes what happens, you could be pushing too hard. You're missing signs that somebody is struggling, you're assuming that silence means that they agree with something. And then also sometimes you realize that people need your encouragement. They need your encouragement more than they need pressure, and maybe that was part of it as well.
Encouragement versus pressure. Yeah, it's interesting. If you do anything at a high level, there's always going to be pressure, and oftentimes the pressure is coming from yourself too. If you're a high performer, you're putting pressure
Yeah. Yeah.
on yourself. But what I've noticed too in coaching at any level, because I think a good leader is oftentimes a very good coach too, is being specific. Like you mentioned encouragement, but being specific with the encouragement. It can be something very tiny, right? Because we're talking about building trust over micro moments. I think that's a big trust builder, is when you point out something very specific, and it can be minor, to that person that would make a difference if they heard it. And like when we're getting in the thick of things, it's busy, we miss things. It's very easy to overlook that, but to sometimes
Yeah.
just slow down and take that moment to say, I see you, right? I see you for,
Yeah.
and that thing that you did,
100%.
I see it.
Yes, 100%. And I honestly think, TJ, you've asked me about why do people follow me? I think that it is because I really do pour into people. And if I could give that advice to anybody, it is to know your people, love them well, and pour into them, right? Where it's not about building up yourself as a leader. It's really about, building other people up. And that's really what makes a great leader, right? Is just helping people see the best within themselves. So, um, if we could go back to that, I think that that's what has, why people follow me specifically, is because I love people, and encouragement is huge. People need to be encouraged. I think that there's enough pressure out there from every aspect of our lives. And if you find somebody that can come alongside you and help you step into the next phase, do something significant, then that helps people to um, just continue on and be better than they were the day before.
Yeah, that's so good. And I mean, from your perspective, like, leaders in all industries, right? What do you think is maybe the story that they tell themselves or the board, or maybe the lies that they believe as to why their team isn't performing?
Oh, wow. Yeah. I think that there's a lot of lies that people tell themselves, it could be, that there's a talent problem, but the truth is there's a trust problem in that. Um, I Yeah, I just I don't know. Just what are your thoughts related to that, TJ?
Yeah, I think what happens is it's easy to blame the market. It's easy to say people don't want to work hard anymore. It's easy to
Yep.
say, oh, Gen Z are a bunch of
Yep.
lazy kids that don't have good work ethic.
Yeah.
And maybe there are elements of truth to all of this.
Elements is
Elements. But even if there is, it's still our responsibility as leaders, right, to figure out a solution to that. And I think like each
yeah,
generation, like Gen Z, Gen Y, I don't even know all the generations. I'm a millennial, right? But it is different in the workforce,
it
and
is.
it, but also the types of work that are being done now is so different. Like people aren't just showing up to a factory and like they're a cog in a wheel. I think more now than ever, people want to feel like they're actually doing meaningful work. Like they're
Agreed.
not just like punching in,
Yeah,
punching out, and
yeah,
like they're going to put in their
right.
hard labor for 40 years and get a pension and
Yeah,
retire. Like that was the mindset at one point, and you can
that
make a
was.
pretty good living and at that point. And like the men went off to work. I mean, a lot of the women did too, but it was just different time. But
Right,
now
right.
I think so. Just the way the culture at large is such that people want to be connected to the work that they do. They can
I
literally go
agree.
and start a, I don't know, a YouTube page and make tens of thousands of dollars a day. They literally could do that. And I mean,
Yeah,
not everyone wants to be an influencer, but they have that option. Or are they going to come and work for your company? Why do they want to work for your company? What is your mission there? And
yeah,
yes, part of it is to fill a need because they have bills to pay and they want a paycheck. But you can go and work for so many different companies.
yeah,
So what is it that they're working toward? How am I creating meaning from the work that I'm doing? Right? What
yeah,
skills can I bring to the table? How can I be creative within my work? How can I have purpose in what I'm doing? And when we talk about performance, right, and let's say underperformance, again, it's easy to cast blame and say, oh, this generation, these type of people, nobody wants to work. But I think we need to look ourselves in the mirror as leaders and say, am I somebody that should be followed? And that's
yeah.
a very hard question to answer because
That's
sometimes
so,
the answer is no.
yeah,
I've been
yeah,
there as well, where I'm like, maybe I'm in a leadership position, but would I follow myself? If I
right.
truly, if I truly look at myself in the mirror, how I'm showing up, my personal standards, what I'm saying, does that match what I'm asking my team to do? And if there's a
Right.
discrepancy there, well, maybe that explains some of the underperformance. So
Yeah,
I think that is the harder part of this, is to really look in the mirror. But let's say you are.
I agree.
Let's say you
I
are
agree.
somebody worth following. But it's still our responsibility to show up and say, have I created the environment, the pathway, the connection, the trust inside of this organization, inside of these teams here that are going to empower people, that are going to really pull
Yeah.
people to
And
want to do good work?
yeah. And people want to feel valued, right? They want to feel seen. They want to feel safe. And are you providing that type of environment as well? Valued to me comes high, high, high on the list, right? People want to be valued. And so are you the kind of leader that's valuing people? Are you helping them feel seen? Are you speaking into their daily life? These are things that I think are important to think about as well.
Yeah, it's the trust, the value, right? And let's assume that, okay, you're getting paid enough. Like we've met that mark. Like the compensation
Right.
is good enough where, okay, we're comparing apples to apples. It then becomes like, the meaning, the purpose, and then am I being valued? Because I think that when you feel like you're actively not being valued, I think that erodes trust faster than so many
Agreed.
other things.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Agreed.
okay, yeah, why would I even voice my opinion? Why would I bring new ideas to the table? And I think you start to see this play out over time. So we add some color to it, and definitely riff on this with me here because I know you've seen it too. Somebody who comes in as a high performer, they're highly engaged, they're giving the ideas, oh, we should try this. And then they're still performing, they're still meeting metrics, but maybe they're a little bit more silent. They're not speaking up anymore. Right. And you
Yeah.
can kind of see this happen over time. Maybe it's over the course of months. And you're wondering, everything seems like it's okay. They're still hitting their numbers. And then maybe now they're not exceeding their numbers anymore. They're not really speaking up. The answers are short. And like, okay, they've become more and more disengaged. No one's really challenging them. those are those signs very early on. Like something is different. What is the disconnect here? And unless it's
Yeah.
addressed, ultimately what's going to happen, what I've seen is that person is going to leave. They're going to go somewhere else. I mean, have you seen
Yep.
that too?
I've absolutely seen that. I have absolutely seen that, And when you think about, how hard it is to hire the right people, to train the right people, to retain the right people, you do not want somebody becoming disengaged. So, at that point, you need to really look into why are they disengaged? What is happening with them? What's going on? Why are they disengaged? And figure out how, I think that typically through a conversation, through knowing that person, through spending time with that person, you're going to figure it out, what's going on because you probably don't want to lose that person. And so at that point, it just becomes, figuring that piece out so that you can get them back to, their starting point of being excited about being there, wanting to be a very valued member of the team.
Yeah, and it's a road that you walk together, right? Side by
It
side.
really is.
Yeah,
Yep, it
and I think
really
too,
is.
but the sooner it can be addressed. Remember that book, Crucial Conversations?
Hmm.
Yeah, I think yeah, that's something I think about
Yeah, there's
often.
nothing wrong with crucial conversations. Crucial conversations people steer away from, I think, but crucial conversations are what make everything. If you can't have a crucial conversation, um, then you're probably just beating around the bush and you're never going to get to the truth, right? But that crucial conversation gets you both to a place where you're on the same playing field and you're talking about the same thing. And when you get to that point, you can fix it. Well, something's going to happen at that point when you're able to have that conversation that can shift and change everything. So,
Yeah, the context for me said, and from my experience, I've seen the longer you put off the hard thing, the difficult conversation, oftentimes the worse
yes,
it becomes, and sometimes it becomes unrecoverable. And so, yes, that short temporary discomfort that you have, if you the sooner that you can do it, one, I think that actually adds to the trust bucket as well, right?
I
Because we
agree
can
with that.
pretend that things are okay when we know they're not. We're talking about this employee behind their back because they're not meeting numbers for the third month or whatever it is. But if we can address that much sooner, and again, come from the place that like you've always done, I care about you. One, what's going on, right? It
Yeah.
personally, and maybe it's that conversation. And two, can we reset here? And maybe it brings to light something that you weren't even aware of, and we're
Yeah.
able to
And it
to
could
address
be
together.
in both of you. It could be in how you're leading that person. It could be in what's going on with that person. But I do think that is the breaking ground of figuring out what's going on. And I also think that sometimes people think that accountability is a bad word. I sort of could relate that to crucial conversations because nobody really likes either one, but they're both vitally important. And so accountability and compassion actually really do belong together. You can't have one without the other. And so same with that crucial conversation, compassion has to come into that as well. But that crucial conversation has to happen to get to a breaking point, so that you can move beyond that. So,
Yeah, it's so good. And I mean, I think there are a lot of leaders out there who are always trying to be better. They're improving their skills. They're trying to hire coaches to see what their blind spots are. But there are also people out there who are saying like this. Yeah, this sounds great. It makes sense, but it's like it's soft stuff. Right? What would you say to them? Like, what is I don't want to say bad culture because no one, I don't think anyone's going to admit that they have bad culture. But
yeah,
if the culture is not great or you see problems there, like what is this actually costing them?
yeah. Well, so there's a statistic that talks about the turnover cost, and I think that turnover cost is anywhere from 50 to 200% of salary per employee. And so there's just trillions of trillions lost in productivity whenever you have this turnover. So hiring, let's go back to that piece of it. Hiring is not always tried and true, right? We always try to hire the best, but once you bring that person onto your team, you better begin to invest in them. But the real cost, is harder to measure, right? And that piece that's harder to measure is loyalty, innovation, lost energy, lost people who could have stayed. That's where, man, that those are the things that are heartbreaking to me, because you could have had all of that, right, in that person that you've already hired. You don't have to lose money in productivity. You could have, you know, preserved that, if you would have probably maybe invested in a different way. So yeah. So the most expensive thing in an organization can be lost when you lose trust in people. So
Yeah.
that's really a crucial piece of it as well.
Yeah, I think about this, and there's the direct costs, right, associated with turnover. And I think companies are acutely, good companies are acutely aware of that. They're like, okay, yeah, we know it costs more to for somebody to leave and then to hire somebody, because there's on-ramp time, there's loss of productivity time, and all of the steps involved in bringing on and onboarding somebody new, like you had mentioned those numbers. But I think
Yep.
there, you were alluding to some of the hidden costs around
Yeah.
this. And if you're starting to lose some of your best people, maybe one's here, one is there, it's not like they just up and decided to leave one day. Rarely. I
Yeah.
mean, sometimes
It doesn't
people just
happen
like,
overnight
they just
typically.
like pack up their stuff and they're out.
Yeah.
And I mean, they're
Yeah.
going to do that anyway. But let's assume that's
Yeah.
not the case here. What often happens, and again, it's harder to quantify, is in that 3 month, 6 month, 12-month period, right, where that person was like wrestling in their mind, am I going to stay, can I make it work here, can I really impact the change that I want to make, can I hit my professional goals within this company. And the more that that answer becomes no in their mind, the more they start to maybe check out, to start exploring some other options. Maybe they turn down their efforts a little bit, and there's so much loss of productivity there that is so much harder to quantify, right? And I think that, again, this comes back to the culture, and it's so difficult. Like, how do you continue to keep people engaged, not just for their first 2 months there, but what is their 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 3 years, 5 years, for these companies that recognize these people are assets to the team. How do we
Yeah.
intentionally create,
Yeah.
maintain, expand upon that environment day in and day out, so that people
Yeah.
actually want to work here and
Yeah.
stay here?
I think that, part of that has to come when, that people can come in and they can speak honestly. They feel like they're heard. Um, I think that sometimes we try to hide, mistakes, and we kind of pack them away, but mistakes are discussed and they're not hidden, right? So let's talk about them. Let's redo that for the next time. It doesn't have to look like that. Accountability exists, and you can have dignity in that accountability. It's a beautiful word. It doesn't have to be bad. I think that it's important that any of the leadership is approachable. Um, that is a big deal. And sometimes you've asked me for examples in this, but that's a big deal. When a leader's not approachable, I just had this happen. Somebody called me and asked me a question about this recently, where their leadership's not approachable, and that doesn't lend itself well to wanting to be a part of a bigger team. But because people want to feel a sense of ownership. They want to be a part of something that they feel like they're actively contributing to, that's something that's bigger than them. So I think that these are all things that are important when you're trying to, paint the picture of what do people want, what's going to help people to want to stay where they are and be a part of something. And that's, maybe that's where you find longevity in some of these things.
I had this thought that we may need to just kind of go back and forth and kind of chew on together. But we've been in some roles that are very, very well earning, decent earning roles, right? Sales capacity, leadership capacity. And I don't want to seem out of touch with the people out there, maybe the entry level employees, the people in non-glamorous jobs where they're maybe they're mopping the floors and cleaning the toilets, and they're doing what is necessary to get a
Yeah.
paycheck. And maybe they're not thinking about, man, this is the company where I'm gonna like reach all of my goals in. But at the same time, like, how does a leader of an organization maybe connect with those folks who are just trying to survive? Because I mean, it's very, very different place to be in.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know the answer.
I think that it's a connecting problem. I think it's a connecting problem. You know, John Maxwell wrote a book called Are You, I'm trying to think of it. Are you connecting? Are you communicating? Or are you connecting? Actually, I don't think that's the way the book goes. But but the premise behind it, the thought behind it is, you know, connecting is different than communicating. And when you connect with people, that is what changes everything, right? So the connecting with the people. So I think that culture isn't a program that you launch. It's a climate that you live, right? So you're creating this climate. Are you connecting with people? Are you, you know, bringing them in? Are you helping them feel like they have ownership in something? So no matter what the job is, that's the message behind it. You know, you get to create an environment that people want to be a part of as a leader. You get to create that environment.
Yeah, I love that, because coming back to your initial definition of culture, like that feeling that you get when a leader walks in the room, you think about anyone at any level in the organization, and if you've done this really well, like each company is like a living organism. You think of the word
Yeah.
company, it's a group of people, right? It's like it's a
Yeah.
living organism, and so each company has its own kind of aspects of their culture. But let's say you're the minimum wage employee at whatever Acme Corporation, but you still feel valued. You still have trust with your direct report. You still feel like going, I'm probably not going to be here for the rest of my life, because I think each role has its own time limits, and some
Yeah.
people will stay
Seasons.
forever, and but there's also roles that every 6 months, every couple of years, like they're going to go on to bigger and better things. And
Yeah.
knowing that you still support them at this phase of their life in their career,
Yeah.
knowing they're going to leave at some point. Like I've been part of those roles. Like I know I'm not going to be here forever, but it's like I'm still
Hmm.
going to do the best that I can. It's a stepping stone for
Hmm.
me. But to have leaders that are still investing in you, knowing
Yeah.
that they're not going to be able to fully benefit from the fruits of that investment, like that's something I think is super important in a culture too.
Yeah, you know, I think that that's really, really important, and that could actually go back to the culture of Chick-fil-A, and I think about that because I have a friend who owns a couple of Chick-fil-A's,
Yeah.
and he's had so many young people come into his organization. He, you know, trains them. He does leadership programs with them. He pours into these people, knowing that they are not going to stay. But that's who we are as leaders. If you're a good leader, you're pouring into people even if it's for a short season, because it's part of the bigger picture. You're pouring into people that are going to go into the next phase of their life, and it's just perpetual, right? So you poured good stuff, they're going to pour good stuff. It's just part of what we have to do as leaders is pouring into other people.
Ah, that's so good. Chick-fil-A is such a good example of that. And they're going to be the handful of people, the 0.05% that stay at Chick-fil-A. They open their own franchise within Chick-fil-A and they stay within that organization.
Small,
But
small percentage though.
majority of
Yeah,
people, they're
are going to
high
go
school
on.
kids, they're college kids, they're
Yep.
coming in, and
Yep.
but to be able to still have that mindset of my job as a leader is still to pour as much into them as I can, because ultimately my job is to create more
Yeah.
leaders, right? And if you're able to instill skills and discipline, and not disciplining them, but like disciplines
Yeah,
and
of
ways
course.
of being and a mindset, you know, I think I forecast in the future, like, man, how would I know if I was a good leader? Well, if I have people that are like surrounding, coming up to me when I'm 70 years old that are saying, wow, you had such an impact on my life. And like, and these are people, maybe only I work with them for 3 months, or
Yeah.
whatever it is,
Yeah.
and say, okay,
Right.
maybe I did do something right.
Yeah. And that's what you want, TJ. That is exactly what you want. You want this opportunity to, I think that every single day we're given a fresh start, a brand new day every single day. And that's the beauty of just, the life that we live. We get to wake up every single morning and start fresh every single day. And so that would be the hope, is that, you get an opportunity today to pour into somebody. But these days compound right on each other. They just get, more, they here you are, 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, 6 years down the road, and you poured into people. And maybe you didn't even realize you were doing it. You had that opportunity that day. You spoke life into them. You spoke whatever it was, some type of encouragement. You inspired them. And that multiplies, right? People love that. And I think that that's the opportunity that we have as leaders. You don't always have to think about, what's going to happen, 6 months down the road, but what are you going to do today to motivate, inspire, grow, challenge somebody? And that's, to me, that's what leadership is. It's your opportunity today.
I feel like we could just end right there. I mean, that was such a good hammer home point. But the point I think I want to maybe close with is Be the Bean is a faith-based organization. We
It
put
is.
that first. And
Amen.
I think it goes hand in hand with leadership. I think it goes hand in hand with our values of daily life. Where do you see the cross section between like Be the Bean at work and our faith, and how do you think that shapes like how we show up as leaders and the way that we work with organizations, even if they're not like a faith? I mean, not all organizations that we work with are faith based,
Yeah.
but how do we
Yeah.
take some of those same principles and ideologies and kind of weave that in a way that's not like overbearing?
Yeah, I think that the principles are all the same. And I think that when you think about human nature and the goodness that was planted inside of all of us, the encouragement, the motivation, the inspiration, the truth that we speak, I think that all of that resonates across every single, wherever you are. It could resonate. And I would never want to move away from those values, that core principle of like who we are, what shaped us, why we are, or how we are the way that we are. And so I would just think that, we've been successful in Be the Bean in our networking, and that part of that is truly the faith component. It's the community, it's networking, it's leadership, all of that. And to kind of move that into to Be the Bean at work, the principles are very, very similar. And I think that just, bringing that to the core of, working principle, is similar. It's all kind of tied together.
No, I agree. And to stand firm in our values, because I think when companies do that, like I think we need to lead by example there. Like if we were going to put that piece aside, I don't think we have the moral authority to come into an organization and talk to them about their culture, their values, if we're not
If we,
embodying that ourselves. And what I've come to realize is that's not going to be for everyone. Like, and we're
and
not
that's
going to be for
okay.
everyone. Be the Bean is not going to be for everyone, and that's
That's
okay.
right.
And that's
Yeah.
okay. Same
But
thing
we
with
know,
very good companies. Very good
yeah,
companies, the products and services they provide are not going to be for everyone. And so the stronger that they can stand firm within their values, create the culture that they desire, more they're going to attract those type of individuals to work with them, but also the types of customers that they're going to bring on as well.
yeah, agreed. Agreed. Yeah. I think that we know who we are and we know what we do well. And if we can help other people to step into that, and help them to, realize the potential that they have to, have these, create the climate, to create the culture, to live by, that even the 10 commandments, that's some simple stuff. What if you brought that into the workplace? Those are
Sure.
all good principles.
Yeah. No, I love it. And I think that Be the Bean principle, Be the Coffee Bean, transcends just about any situation you can think of. Like I think about going into my kid's school, right? And you hear about all the reports of like bullying and kids not getting along, and the way schools are these days. It's like, okay, well, what if we look at this coffee bean principle, right? And we're able to share that message with the kids. Be well, yeah, I'm going to be the coffee. I'm
Yeah.
going to change the
Yeah.
environment around me instead of being changed by the environment, becoming hard and aggressive or whatever it is, or getting soft and no, I'm going to be the person that changes things. And if we can have more kids that do, the more leaders we can create that way. I think it's such a
Yeah.
good mindset to instill there. But in the workplace,
I agree.
at home, wherever you go, it's a nice little reminder. It's like, be the bean, be the bean. And I'm not saying it's easy. I actually, I think it's probably the hardest. It's probably the hardest aspect of it. But leadership is not easy. Leadership is
No.
responsibility. It's difficult. But
Yeah.
choosing to be the bean means that you're the one who is taking that. You want that responsibility. You're taking that opportunity to positively impact your environment. And so that's
Agreed.
really the hammer home message here. And if we apply that in the workplace, I think, right, not just with the leaders, but with everyone, right, who's willing to buy into that principle that embodies your culture, your values, the company is going to be so much more productive. It's going to be that place where people want to come and work
Yes.
and
Yeah.
collaborate because
Yeah.
everyone is showing up with that same mentality.
Agreed. Agreed. Yeah. That's what we want to create. And
Yeah,
that's kind of,
that's what we are creating.
that amen.
So
That's what we're creating. And I think that our next thing, TJ, we need to pour into kids too. Because what if we could start them young? What if we started them young with the thought of they get to change their environment rather than being hardened or being softened or being whatever's happening to them, they can change it.
absolutely, it starts with one decision, one choice.
Yeah, it does.
So
So,
we're gonna call it there. I love this episode. I think we need to do more be the bean at work type episodes as well. But yeah, so Shari, just any closing thoughts, any words of wisdom, advice, direction for folks that have stayed to the end?
you know, my biggest words to you would just be to them would be a bean, be the bean. Go and change your environment. Go into your home and love your family. Go to your work and, you know, speak words of kindness and truth and um, you know, to your coworkers. Be humble. Don't think it's all about you.
Message we
Be a
need now
bean.
more than ever.
Yep. Yep.
All right. Well, thanks, guys. We'll see you next time. Shari, thank you very much. We'll see you.
Thank you. Thanks, TJ.